Hi everyone, my name is Rochelle Udachime. I'm going to be sharing with you guys a few facts about immigration and then be talking about how immigration and the different kinds of immigration affects families. I really wanted to talk about this topic because my own parents are immigrants from Nigeria and I've always thought that was so cool. So I wanted to share with you guys just how that experience has been for me and also just the general facts and just generally how it tends to affect families in the US. So first I'm going to start with a couple immigration facts. So first, the proportion of US residents born in another country is higher than it has been since 1910 when the big wave of European immigration peaked. If you include Americans who were born elsewhere, a quarter of the population belonged to an immigrant family. Two-thirds of the people now granted permanent residence in the United States are sponsor relatives. My grandma was actually given residence this way by my mom. So, yeah. Right now in the US, the proportion of US residents that are born in another country, so a portion of US immigrants are is higher than it has been since 1910. And a lot of those immigrants from 1910 were from Europe. So a lot of the Caucasian people that we see today, their ancestors are immigrants from Europe. And they weren't the first people who came in 1710. But now currently all most immigrants, not all, excuse me, most immigrants are from Latin America or Mexico or places like that. A lot of our immigrants today are typically Hispanic. So that's super cool. And then the people who are granted permanent residence now are from it comes from their relatives. In 1965, there were amendments made to the Immigration Nationality Act. um, these amendments to the original 1952 Act lifted all the numerical restrictions on the immigration of spouses, children, and parents of U.S. citizens. So that is what allows all the immigrants, most immigrants that are here today, to sponsor citizenship for their family, which is how my grandma got citizenship. Next, here are some facts about how being an immigrant or a child of an immigrant or even a grandchild of an immigrant can affect the family structure unit. So, first up, we have first generation immigrants. They usually immigrate at working age adulthood. These are the classic immigrants whose fateful decision brings the family to the United States, usually for employment or a better future. Despite success at work, they may never feel fully integrated into the new society, especially if they do not learn English well. I actually know a lot of people who've experienced this specific thing. I have a close friend of mine. He's around 24 years old. He immigrated here when he was 17 from Nigeria. And he, I feel has acculturated or assimilated, excuse me, a lot better than a lot of people who immigrate when they're older. Like my mom immigrated when she was 27, and she was married and had a kid. But yeah, so he came here at the end of high school and still retains so much of his culture, but operates very well in our culture too. And he also knows English well too, so that helps. My uncle, on the other hand, came here when he was around 39 years old, and he always struggled to learn English, and he always felt really insecure about it too, which affects how you then speak English to people who are native. Um, but yeah, he feels that a lot more than I think my friend who immigrated when he was 17 does, because he had already graduated high school, had a college degree, had a job, everything, and then left Nigeria and came here. Um, and I see him struggle a lot more with assimilating to the culture than my other friend does. Then we have the second generation. So these are children of immigrants, me. They were born and raised in the US, but members of an immigrant family. They're the transitional generation whose easier acculturation may lead to conflict with their parents. I also grew up in an immigrant household, but I am not an immigrant. I'm just a child of immigrants. And it was so interesting. I grew up in a Nigerian household, but going out into the world and going out to school and going to the mall and going places in America. I was also growing up with American culture. I have an American accent, and so I got accustomed or assimilated to the culture a lot better than my parents did, and that definitely created some conflict with my parents. The age I wanted a phone, the kind of music I listened to, and the kind of shows I wanted to watch. They just didn't really like get it, and like it caused some fights, but it's also just like kind of funny. Like they were like, oh, like this would never happen in Nigeria. This is not a Nigerian thing. Why do you guys wear this? Why do you guys listen to this? So stuff like that, which did create some conflict, but also it's just really interesting to think about. And then lastly, we have the third generation of immigrants, the grandchildren of immigrants. They may retain their identity as part of an immigrant family, but come to see their ethnicity as family history rather than their own experience. I have a friend whose grandmother is Filipino. His mom is half Filipino. His dad is fully white, and so he's a quarter Filipino. But he adheres very strongly to like, oh, I'm like a fourth Filipino, but his parents are immigrants, and so that kind of experience, like watching him kind of like talk about that and like kind of adhere to that, but also be kind of like farther away from it from like my other friend whose dad is like fully Filipino. It's just kind of an interesting thing. To wrap that all up, being an immigrant or a child of an immigrant or even the grandchild of an immigrant can affect the family unit in so many different ways, in interesting ways, in good ways, and sometimes ways that cause conflict. Um, but it is really interesting to think about and really interesting to observe, especially in my own life, like seeing that among like my grandmother and my uncle and then my siblings and I, and how we assimilate to the culture much quicker and what things we do that my grandmother and my uncle don't. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I hope you have a good day.